"Hey, old man," he said loud enough for everyone else to hear. "What was your rank in the Navy?" There are men who fade into obscurity, not for lack of deeds, but by choice. George Lawson was one of them. At 83, he spent his days mending nets and cleaning boats on a pier, treated like just another stubborn old man who refused to let go of the past. No one there knew that this quiet man had once commanded one of the most dangerous missions of the Cold War. No one suspected that his faded uniform concealed decades of sacrifice until a young lieutenant asked the wrong question in the wrong tone, and the sea answered with a silence none of them would ever forget. Beaufort Pier stirred to life before the first light touched the water. Seagulls circled above the anchored vessels, their cries piercing the stillness, while the scent of ocean salt mingled with diesel fumes in the crisp morning air. George Lawson had already claimed his usual spot, as he did every single day without fail. He sat upon a weathered wooden bench, its surface worn glass smooth by countless seasons of use. His calloused hands worked methodically on a torn fishing net, fingers moving with practiced precision despite their age. Each knot he tied carried the patience of a man who understood deeply that nothing worth building ever comes from rushing. The local fishermen acknowledged him with silent nods as they passed, and he returned each greeting in kind. There existed no warmth between them, no casual conversation, only a mutual respect expressed through quiet gestures. Lawson occupied a modest dwelling 3 blocks inland from the harbor. The house stood plain and unpretentious, topped with a corrugated tin roof that sang when rain fell upon it. A narrow porch faced westward, offering an unobstructed view of the horizon where sky married sea each evening. His daily pattern never wavered from its established rhythm. He rose before 5 o'clock, walked the familiar path to the pier, labored until the sun reached its peak, took his midday meal at the small diner overlooking the docks, then returned home as darkness gathered. This particular morning arrived under a ceiling of heavy gray clouds that pressed down upon the world. Wind swept across the water with unusual force, causing boats to strain and rock against their mooring lines. Lawson completed his repair work on the damaged net and folded the material with care before placing it atop a coiled pile of thick rope. Rising slowly from the bench, he felt every one of his years concentrated in his aching knees. He made his way toward an old wooden skiff that lay overturned on the sandy shore nearby. The small vessel had required attention for several weeks now, and he had finally resolved to address its neglected condition. Kneeling beside the upturned hull, he retrieved a piece of coarse sandpaper and began smoothing the cracked and weathered wood. The rhythmic scraping created a meditation of sound, steady and purposeful. His focus remained absolute, his movements unhurried. Around him, the pier continued its gradual awakening as workers arrived and machinery rumbled to life in the distance. Yet Lawson existed in his own private world, connected to the present moment through the simple act of restoration. He had learned long ago that honest work performed with full attention brought its own form of peace. The boat beneath his hands held no secrets, demanded no explanations. It simply needed repair, and he was there to provide it. The growl of approaching engines shattered the morning calm. 3 military vehicles swung into the pier's gravel parking area, their tires churning up clouds of pale dust that drifted lazily across the lot. Doors swung open and 6 young Navy personnel emerged, adjusting their crisp uniforms and exchanging casual remarks among themselves. Leading this group strode Lieutenant Chris Nolan, a tall figure who carried himself with unmistakable confidence. A perpetual grin played across his features as he surveyed his surroundings with proprietary satisfaction. The men carried clipboards and cameras, equipment for what appeared to be a routine evaluation of the port facilities scattered throughout this region. Nolan had received his promotion only months earlier, and the fresh authority sat upon his shoulders like a garment he enjoyed showing off to anyone who might observe. His voice projected loudly across the pier as he issued directions, each word delivered with absolute certainty of its own importance. He gestured broadly toward various structures and installations, while his subordinates hurried to keep pace and capture his instructions. As the group approached the area where Lawson knelt working, Nolan slowed his stride. His eyes fell upon the elderly figure hunched over the damaged skiff, and something between curiosity and dismissal crossed his youthful face. He stopped completely, studying the old man the way one might examine an artifact from another era. The question came without preamble or courtesy. Hey, old man, what was your rank in the Navy? Lawson did not lift his gaze from the wood grain beneath his weathered fingers. Lifeboat captain, he replied, his voice carrying no particular inflection. Laughter erupted from the gathered sailors. One of the younger men offered a quip that generated even greater amusement from his companions. Throughout this display, Lawson continued his methodical sanding, utterly unbothered by the mockery swirling around him. His indifference appeared to irritate the lieutenant, whose smile tightened almost imperceptibly. Before proceeding toward the main inspection area, Nolan paused once more beside the overturned skiff. His tone shifted to something almost patronizing, as though he were extending charity to someone less fortunate. Hey, old man, why don't you come aboard the ship with us? Might stir up some dusty old memories for you. The other sailors exchanged knowing glances, several, struggling to suppress their amusement at their commander's sport. Lawson's hands ceased their motion. He gazed outward across the endless gray water for a long moment, then offered a small, almost imperceptible nod. Without speaking a single word, he set aside his sandpaper, withdrew a stained rag from his back pocket to wipe the sawdust from his palms, and rose to follow the departing group. Nolan watched this with evident satisfaction before pressing further. Come on, sailor, what was your rank really? I need to know whether I should be calling you sir or grandpa. This produced another burst of laughter from the lieutenant himself as he turned to share his triumph with his men. None of them noticed that the old man's expression had not changed in the slightest. Lawson fell into step behind the group of sailors, maintaining a measured pace that belied his advanced years. The pier bustled with its usual morning commerce. Dock workers hauled heavy nets from returning vessels, while fishermen readied their boats for another day upon the water. Several of these weathered men glanced toward Lawson with evident surprise, unaccustomed to seeing him venture beyond his customary territory. The vessel moored at the adjacent dock commanded immediate attention through sheer presence alone. An Arleigh Burke-class destroyer rose from the water like a mountain of military engineering, its dark gray hull stretching toward the horizon in both directions. The warship had arrived for scheduled maintenance, and today's inspection formed part of standard operational protocol. Nolan ascended the gangway with long, purposeful strides, his voice carrying commentary about technical specifications and standard procedures that his subordinates dutifully recorded. The sailors followed in loose formation, scribbling notes and snapping photographs as instructed. Lawson came last, his weathered hands tucked casually into the pockets of his worn trousers, his pale eyes quietly absorbing every detail of the massive vessel surrounding him. When his feet touched the main deck, something shifted in his demeanor. He stood motionless for several heartbeats, allowing the subtle motion of the ship to register through his body. The metallic percussion of waves striking steel resonated around him, a rhythm as familiar to his bones as his own heartbeat. This sound had lived within him for more decades than these young sailors had been alive. "Everything all right there, Grandpa?" Nolan called out, pivoting with theatrical concern painted across his features. "Don't go fainting on me now. There's a chair right over there if you need to rest those old bones." Scattered chuckles arose from the assembled men, though something had shifted in their quality. There was an aspect to how the elderly stranger regarded this vessel, a recognition in his bearing that did not align with the joke being played. Lawson offered no response. Instead, he walked to the deck's edge and placed his palm flat against the cold metal railing, his gaze descending to study the churning water below. Nolan dismissed this with a roll of his eyes and resumed command of the inspection, leading his team toward the ship's control center. Lawson followed at his own pace, maintaining several yards of distance between himself and the group. The interior quarters pressed close on either side, illuminated by the harsh glow of fluorescent fixtures mounted overhead. As he walked, Lawson's fingertips traced along the painted bulkheads, touching each surface as though reacquainting himself with the features of an old friend's face. The inspection party entered the control room and dispersed according to their assigned duties. Some checked instrument panels, while others tested system functions and documented their findings with cameras. Nolan positioned himself at the room's center, expounding upon navigation radar capabilities to an attentive subordinate. Lawson remained near the entrance, his attention captured entirely by the array of instruments and displays lining the walls. One piece of equipment drew his focus with particular intensity. Mounted beside newer technology hung an older communications panel, clearly still functional despite its vintage appearance. His question emerged quiet but distinct. That model still operates? Nolan turned sharply, visibly startled to hear the old man's voice. What? Oh, that thing. Yeah, it's ancient, but still works fine. We maintain it as backup equipment. Why do you ask? Lawson crossed the room without responding immediately. He extended his hand toward the panel and brushed his fingers across its worn buttons and faded labels. A faint smile touched his weathered features, the expression of someone greeting a companion from long-vanished days. TX-47 model. I operated one identical to this in '72. Nolan's eyebrow climbed skeptically. You served in '72? On what kind of vessel exactly? Submarine. The word hung suspended in the recycled air. A petty officer exchanged a skeptical glance with a nearby sailor. Nolan, however, maintained his mocking posture. A submarine, is that right? And what exactly did you do aboard? Swab the decks? Lawson turned fully to face him at last. His faded blue eyes locked onto the lieutenant's gaze with a calm so complete it seemed to compress the atmosphere within the room. The silence stretched between them like a held breath. I commanded it. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The quality of stillness that descended differed fundamentally from awkward pause or uncomfortable silence. This was something heavier, something that demanded acknowledgement. Nolan's mouth opened to form a response, but before any words could escape, rapid footsteps echoed down the corridor outside. A young sailor burst through the doorway, breathing hard from evident exertion, and snapped immediately to rigid attention. Lieutenant Nolan, sir, Admiral Pierce has just arrived at the pier. He's boarded the ship at this moment, sir. Nolan's expression shifted to confusion. This visit appeared nowhere on any schedule he had reviewed. He straightened his uniform with hurried hands and barked orders for everyone to assume formal positions. The sailors and petty officers arranged themselves in proper lines, while Lawson remained where he had been standing, quietly observing from the room's periphery. The measured cadence of authoritative footsteps grew louder in the passageway, accompanied by murmured voices carrying unmistakable deference. The door swung wide and Admiral Jonathan Pierce entered the control room. He stood 67 years old, tall and ramrod straight, his close-cropped gray hair lending severity to features softened by intelligent eyes. His dress uniform gleamed with decorations, each medal and ribbon representing chapters of distinguished service. Two senior officers flanked him, their expressions appropriately grave. Nolan and his men rendered immediate salutes, which Pierce returned with practiced efficiency. But the Admiral's attention had already found someone else entirely. His gaze fixed upon Lawson standing quietly against the far bulkhead, and his stern expression transformed into something approaching wonder. He advanced 2 deliberate steps, his eyes never leaving the old sailor's face. Commander Lawson. Pierce's voice emerged steady yet weighted with profound respect. Nolan blinked rapidly, comprehension failing him. His men exchanged bewildered glances. Lawson remained utterly still, meeting the Admiral's gaze with unchanged composure. Pierce closed the remaining distance between them and halted at arm's length. Then, with ceremonial precision, he raised his hand in a slow, formal salute. Sir, I am deeply honored to see you again. The room existed in perfect silence. Lawson held the Admiral's eyes for an extended moment before returning the salute with matching solemnity. Pierce turned to address the assembled personnel, his tone assuming instructional gravity. This man commanded Operation Shield in 1972. During the Cold War's most dangerous period, an American submarine became trapped nearly 1,000 feet beneath the Barents Sea. Her crew possessed fewer than 20 hours of breathable air remaining. Color drained from Nolan's face as he listened. Commander Lawson led the rescue mission through hostile waters under constant threat of enemy detection and attack. He navigated in absolute silence for 12 consecutive hours, located the disabled submarine, and coordinated the extraction that saved 43 souls. Pierce paused, his gaze returning to Lawson. I was among those men. The Admiral continued speaking. Following that mission, he received the Medal of Honor, the Silver Star, and the Navy Cross. He declined every decoration, stating he had merely performed his duty. Nolan stepped forward on the unsteady legs. Sir, I had no idea. Please forgive me. Lawson faced him directly. His eyes held no anger, only the weariness of accumulated years. He placed one hand upon the young lieutenant's shoulder. Son, the uniform does not make the man. Character does. Respect does. Pierce addressed his officers with finality. Remember this moment. Leadership flows from integrity, never from rank alone. Lawson nodded once and walked toward the exit. At the threshold, he paused, surveying the room one final time before disappearing down the corridor. He descended the gangway with the same steady pace, collected his sandpaper from the sand, and resumed his work beneath the breaking sunlight. Some heroes never seek recognition. They let their service speak for them.